What is going on, YouTube? Culturedog back with a movie review. And been thinking heavily about Spectre over the past day. And figured I'd share my thoughts on it with you here. Give a little review. And I've got plenty of other James Bond videos coming up too. I'm going to show you my collection of James Bond books. Not just the Fleming books, but also all the books, reference books about the films. Because I got quite a few. And I just got a few new ones that were released to tie in with Spectre. And then I'm going to do my listing, my numerical ranking of the films in the series. Get that out there, and some other fun things too. Maybe some like best of like fight scenes, best of car scenes, that kind of stuff. But yes, Spectre. I've been waiting for a few years, 3 years since Skyfall came out. And one of the things I had mentioned, I don't know, way back when I started my Culture Dogs radio show, probably when Die Another Day came out, we did a segment called the Bond Producers Fantasy Camp, and this was before Casino Royale dropped, which created so many realities for these fantasies within my head I wanted, especially for the tact of the series, how I wanted to see it go, and return to somewhere of the Fleming-esque roots, etc., and maybe go back to some Dalton-esque, Sean Connery-esque times. And my wildest dreams as a fanboy came true, and we've been living in this new golden age of 007 cinema, which is almost the second coming of the the 60s hotspot period when Goldfinger and Thunderball was just really capturing the world's imaginations. So I'm a big fan of Daniel Craig's Bond and was very much looking forward to this, the 24th outing in the series. But one of the things I had mentioned in that Bond Producers Fantasy Camp was that I really wanted to see a director return to helm a film immediately after the one he had done before. So even though Martin Campbell had done GoldenEye and Casino Royale, it had been quite some time before somebody did 1-2 punch, and I kind of wanted to have a little bit of a recap of the old Terence Young era pictures, and kind of, even if it's just for a brief moment. But the Brosnan era really suffered from just a lack of strong visionary directors, and just there was no consistency there. There was always a new guy every film. So you got guys like Roger Spotswood, no offense, but so having Sam Mendes on board was pretty cool. And Skyfall was a film that broke a lot of the molds for the Bond franchise, and I know it's very hit or miss with a lot of people, and there's some bits about it that still sit ill with me, largely the need to reboot the series, even after Quantum of Solace had pretty much established Bond where he needed to go, where he needed to be to start off the next film as a mission film. And Mendes and now Craig apparently are not very thrilled to do simple old school mission films, and really want to explore the mythos as much as they can. So Skyfall went in a very different direction than I really anticipated. That said, Roger Deakins' cinematography is probably the best in the whole series. They go back to shooting on film in this one. Hoyt van Hoytema is the DP on this film, and it's not as it's still kind of like tannish orange and a little bit murky, but it's not shot through with those rich colors like some of the scenes in China in Skyfall. But this film opens up with an amazing set piece in Mexico City, the Day of the Dead, and it is just so elegant. And that's the first half of this film. It really just struck me how elegant it all was. I mean, this is Bond who's a little bit more comfortable in his skin and knows what he's doing in his position now. So there's a fantastic tracking shot that reveals Bond in the audience in Mexico City at the Day of the Dead, in a costume that's clearly going to be a fan favorite for Halloweens in the future. And this shot follows him, and I loved how it integrates source music. So there's scenes outside in this plaza, and there's a band like a percussion band playing, and that integrates into Thomas Newman's score as he goes by. It reminded me a lot of like a Bond Birdman, so Bond Man. So it follows Bond and this woman as they're traveling around through the public and wind up in a hotel room, and he runs off on a mission. But that's the coolest thing. He elegantly runs off on a mission. He doesn't even break his stride when he goes outside onto the ledge and then runs around the rooftops. Like, contrast that with some of the rooftop running in Quantum of Solace, where there's all these roofing pieces and tiles just sliding off and skittering this way and that way. It's just very like brute force and violent. And this film is all about just the fluid motion and elegant motion, and that is also reflected in a car chase a little bit later too. That's very similar, but he just has this efficiency of motion when he's just effortlessly gliding across these rooftops in order to catch sight of a target. And we don't know why Bond is in Mexico City, who he's after, what's going on, and clearly there's some terrorism at play because there's much talk about a stadium blowing up. But come to find out that London is not so happy about not only what Bond's been up to, because there's a lot of collateral damage going on. There's a pretty thrilling helicopter attack scene wherein I kept thinking about, well, wow, this is like really dangerous. Like, I'm surprised he's making all these moves because this is very dangerous to the public, etc. And then quickly thereafter, Ralph Fiennes, stepping into M's shoes now, fully, is just having a hard time dealing with the aftermath of Bond's actions. And I was quickly glad to see that there were consequences. And not only were there consequences for the actions at the opening of this film, there's like rippled consequences from the events of Skyfall. And the first half of the film does a really kind of great job at referencing not just Skyfall, and I was very impressed with the references to the first two Craig films as well, Quantum of Solace and before that Casino Royale. And it works overtime at integrating everything and making it a whole. And that was one of the things I didn't appreciate about Skyfall, was that it largely forgot about Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace and the groundwork they had laid, because it was really just intent on rebooting it and bringing everything back to square one, bringing it back to the 60s vibe, etc., which I did appreciate, but I thought the series had already gotten there and it was a couple steps back. So this time, things are not going well at all in London, and Andrew Scott of Sherlock fame is a weaselly little guy, as he often is, and he's known as C, and is now collaborating with M, and has no need for a 00 program in his very modern idea of British Secret Service and intelligence. And a lot of the same kind of material, the groundwork is trod upon that was done in GoldenEye and some of the other films where Bond is talked about as a dinosaur, etc. But they don't quite apologize for Bond's existence as much as those films did. So I liked how they kind of navigated those waters. But it turns into another case of Bond kind of working on the outskirts of his organization and not necessarily playing by the rules, and he needs to escape to Rome because there's been a trail of breadcrumbs left for him, leading him in that direction. And then he quickly encounters Monica Bellucci's character. They have a really intense scene too, and I love how all of the the elements that you are expecting, like the martini, the name, Bond, James Bond, etc., etc., how they're dumped into this film. They're not unceremoniously dropped into the screenplay like as kind of little touchstones. Oh, the audience needs to see this, audience needs to see that. They're actually artfully integrated, and I like how each one is given a just kind of natural inclusion, and I appreciated that they took the time to make it work. And then that leads to a very shady organization that Bond learns about, and that brings us to the titular Spectre. And if you're a fan of the original Bond films from back in the day, Spectre was Ian Fleming's way of eventually getting around Smersh, who was the big baddie in the first bits of the first few novels, which was Russian for a Schmerz-Spionum, or Death to Spies, and that plays into the film, The Living Daylights, etc. But by the time he got around to working on Thunderball, etc., Spectre was a way cooler, evil organization that wasn't kind of based in the real world, and he had a little bit more artistic freedom to mess with it. Unfortunately, that artistic freedom came on the heels of adapting a television screenplay that he had worked on with a number of gentlemen, including one Kevin McClory, who then later balked at Fleming using Spectre and all the other elements of the screenplay they worked on to create the Thunderball novel. So unfortunately, Spectre and Stavro Blofeld, its head, became kind of partial intellectual property of Kevin McClory, which resulted in the remake of Thunderball known as Never Say Never Again with Sean Connery in 1983, and countless other attempts like Warhead 2000, etc. So it was a long battle for Eon, which was, the estate of Cubby Broccoli. Now his daughter Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson are taking over the reins of the production, and they never had access to Spectre during this whole Daniel Craig run. And now that they've got it back, you had the Quantum Organization, which was set up in the second Craig film, which clearly was meant to be a kind of reboot of Spectre. But now they have to integrate that into the actual Spectre organization, and I appreciated that they did, because they did a lot of really cool stuff establishing Jesper Christensen's character, Mr. White. And I was worried that if they were going to go for the full Spectre action in this film, that they were going to leave all that by the wayside, and thankfully they do not. And that leads Bond all over the place. He goes to Austria, he goes to Morocco, eventually encountering Léa Seydoux' character, who is another nice, not quite equal to Bond, but definitely a very capable female interest, not necessarily a love interest at first. And she's a bit of a spitfire, which I appreciated, and he encounters her at a clinic up in snowy hillsides, which, man, just totally referenced on Her Majesty's Secret Service. There's so many throwback moments calling back to, Thunderball, Dr. No, and, etc. Like From Russia with Love. There's a pretty intense train scene with a fight with Dave Bautista, again, who plays Hinks. And but that stuff wasn't, again, as shoehorned in as it was in Die Another Day, where it's like, hey, look, it's the jetpack. Hey, look, it's this. It had to fit in the story. And I appreciate the work they did to do that. And the story in this film was very, very well discussed, especially last year, because it was part of the Sony hack that was very well publicized. So, I mean, it was a very surreal time to be finding out clues and informations about leaked, Spectre scripts, and people were, proclaiming that North Korea was doing it. So it was this weird moment where art became reality and vice versa. And so I clearly steered away from reading all the spoilers, etc. And then now I've actually gone back and reread all those memos that were kind of between the Bond camp and the Sony camp, and all the kind of back and forth. And clearly there was a lot of stuff written out of this project, and it's a packed film. It's like 2 hours 28 minutes, so it's up there in length. So it gives Casino Royale a run for its money, on Her Majesty's Secret Service, etc. So I'm glad I skipped all that. And then the trailers, of course, did tell you quite a bit about the film. You know that there's shady element of Bond's past, and it looks to be from when he was a young child after his parents died, and that leads to Christoph Waltz's character, who is named Oberhauser, and a lot of people suspect that there's more to Oberhauser than we know from the trailers, and I'm not going to really spill a lot. Unfortunately, there's a lot of cool thematic elements and interesting things that are fun to discuss about this film, but you can't until everybody's seen it. But needless to say, he has an interest in Bond, and their lives are a little bit more intertwined than you may know. And this leads to a chase where, maybe the person chasing the victim is really just being hunted himself the whole time and doesn't even know about it. There's a whole subtext about, the hot on the heels of the NSA surveillance controversy, about a new state, a new security order where just pretty much every camera everywhere is on live, and there is no need for a spy on the streets when everything can be done remotely, with drones and surveillance cameras, etc. like that. So that's all C, Max's character. That's all his kind of neck of the woods, and then M is the old diehard who has guys in the field on the streets, and that's what he's looking to retain and maintain. So while there are a lot of action pieces, and there is a pretty amazing car chase, which is, again, a very, almost in a Michael Mann fashion, how Michael Mann will have intense action scenes but have them be very quiet to the core. that scene is very similar, and I do appreciate what they were getting at. I know a lot of people have been complaining about how it wasn't as dramatic and smashing and in your face as anything from the Bourne films, but it was actually intended to be, you could tell, a step back from that. So again, the elegance comes into play, and where Bond and Hinks are in these supercars that are just gliding effortlessly through the streets of Rome, and Bond is actually having a casual conversation, kind of talking about information that he's sending back to Moneypenny at the time. So that was pretty cool, and I did really appreciate that they went above and beyond at integrating M and later Tanner and Q and Moneypenny. And so, I mean, if everyone was complaining that the old gang was missing from Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace, it really kind of works overtime at giving them so much screen time, and Q even gets to go into the field at one point, which is pretty cool. So I was, flashing back to License to Kill. It was nice having some Fleming references in here. Mendes is notably a fan of the books, and as is Craig. There's a little bit of a drop to the Hildebrand rarity at one point. But it just in tone or feel. There's a great scene in Tangier, maybe about halfway through the film, where Bond and Madeline, Lea Seydoux' character, are just hanging out in this very hot-looking hotel room, and just the buzz about the air and the heat and the quiet, you could just sense it, and it had that same feel as some of Fleming's novels, like Live and Let Die, when there wasn't much going on, like in between the action. So that's what this film does great. It has those moments where it breathes, it exhales a little bit before the next action scene. And it is a rather quiet film overall, which is pretty stunning for a big giant action blockbuster. There's a lot of just very subtle, quiet moments where you're just steeping in the world of these characters. And there were a couple times I was like self-aware, and I was like, wow, the audience is actually really quiet now, which is surprising because you think they'd start shuffling in their seats and getting a little bit anxious. The second half of the film isn't quite as strong as the first half, and I'm not sure if it's just the way it was structured, or there's a secret villainous lair, which was great, but it seemed to have a little bit too much short shrift. It quickly changes gears and moves back to London for a big rousing finale. But I almost feel like there should have been more bits in the villainous lair, and the relationship between Bond and Christoph Waltz's character had me worried, very much so, because there was hints about Bond's past, and I don't necessarily need everybody to be related to one another. I mean, every time that's happened pretty much post Empire Strikes Back, it's been a false way to establish, bogus meaning. Wow, if that guy that's a villain is really your brother, that has just so much more impact, but it's a cheap impact. So I didn't really need that. I understand, why they were kind of going in the directions they were going, and it was scripted fairly well. There are a lot of cooks in the kitchen in this one. You got Neil Purvis and Robert Wade returning, and Jez Butterworth and John Logan. So I understand what they were going for with the villain, and so it does kind of work that he has a relationship with Bond. But it would be good to see again, like, more villains that just have no connection whatsoever. They're just villains, and they're doing their things because they're doing them, and there's a hero that's out to stop them. I don't need everything to be interconnected so much. But thankfully, they didn't cross the line, which I was very appreciative of. The other thing that was on the edge was that you have Silva, the character from Skyfall, who was incredibly just omnipotent, essentially. So now you have the guy that is like almost a rung above him. So what can you do for the next Bond villain except for have Bond versus God, really? Because they're almost. They're so far beyond the old days when it was the big villain was Bond's equal, or his the anti-Bond, like Scaramanga. But now it's like he's essentially going up against deities. They can do anything. They can maybe Lucy from the film Lucy will be his next foe, and she'll just levitate everything and freeze time. So it seems that they are pushing it. So, and I understand too where that's gonna eventually. They're going to hit a wall and have to pull it back and just do a simpler film with simpler villains, etc. Because if it keeps getting grander and bigger and bigger and bigger. And there is a bit of that in play here Whereas even, not to be nerdy, but the Harry Potter series, I remember enjoying the first film, and then the second film came, and they're like, they're going back to school, and there was too much danger too quickly, and it was never going to be interesting stuff going on at the school. It was just like too much intensity, too much near death immediately, and there's a lot of that kind of speed up going on in these films too, where there's there's no time for Bond to just go into an office and check out a file and then go do some research on somebody and all that stuff. It's the edge of the end of the world at all times. So that's going to have to probably pare down at some point too. So overall, it kind of towed some lines I was a little bit worried about, but I mean, I can't complain because it established Spectre, it established an organization, and hopefully they're going to capitalize on that in future films. So and that was my only disappointment with Skyfall, and to an extent this film, was that it seems like nobody is ready to make the next move in this series. It's always setting things up, and that was, I mentioned before, my complaint after Quantum of Solace set things up. We're like, whoa, things aren't set up. They're set up, but we got to still do this and repolish these statues and move this around and do this. I'm like, okay, now what's set up? Well, no, not really. Now we got to set up this new stage and get this all ready. And I understand that there's a lot of thematic juice in that, because you can have the characters evolving and really gonna dig into Bond's psyche, etc. But eventually they're gonna have to hit a period where Bond is this guy and he's kind of a carved block at that point, and his features are set in stone, and it's gonna have to be a lot less dynamic character wise. So I think I'm okay with that. Fans are okay with that, but the filmmakers perhaps aren't quite okay with that. So there's a lot of dancing around, like the place you want to be as a Bond viewer or fan. But that said, there's a lot of great stuff in here. Like I enjoyed all the Fleming-esque moments as much as I love the throwbacks to the earlier Eon films. And I think Daniel Craig was great in it. People are complaining about Monica Bellucci not being in it too long, as she's the character that usually is called the Sacrificial Lamb, but I'm not going to say what happens with her. There's a nice reference to Felix Leiter, too. Apparently he was in an earlier script and drafted. I don't know what happened with that, but I would love to see Jeffrey Wright return as Felix Leiter sometime in the future. But the action is really good. It's not super tightly focused like it was in Quantum of Solace. There's a great train fight scene throwing back to Red Grant with Hanks and Bond, and a really nice discussion with Lea Seydoux and Daniel Craig leading up to that fight that kind of referenced him and Vesper having a chat on the train in Montenegro and Casino Royale. That was the cool thing too. It wasn't just throwbacks to the first films. It was throwbacks to some of the newer ones. There's even bits on the Thames that felt like a little bit like The World Is Not Enough, and there were bits that reminded me of Die Another Day. And I enjoyed that they carried over the kind of thematic element of modernism and electronics being dangerous or evil in a fashion, and kind of keeping things rolling back the odometer to the start. And even the fonts they use in this film are just like plain Courier type fonts, and the villains have like robotic creations that can torture people, but the heroes are always flashing back to older technology. Well, except for Q, he's always rocking a hot laptop, etc. But I do appreciate that they keep referencing older technology or pre internet age technology as being still valuable in today's world. Even the super fancy Aston Martin DB10, this prototype, I think there's only 10 in the world. That even has all these kind of like old school toggles and switches in them. Obviously, because it's supposed to be a prototype within the film, Q's still working on it and everything like that. A lot of good gags in there. Yeah, and the humor is in there. There's a great scene with the mouse that's pretty funny. The stuff with the Aston Martin is really funny, and it's a heavy film overall because there's some serious stuff going on. But it is definitely humorous. So yeah, it does maybe stumble a little bit towards the end. It gets a little busy. Maybe feels a little bit too much like an episode of Sherlock as opposed to a James Bond film. And some of the connections with the heroine and Bond, it maybe feels like there's something that was left on the cutting room floor a little bit. Like it should be a little bit more intense than it is. But that said, I think it's a stronger film than Skyfall. I know that's going to be a controversial stance, but I think it knows its pacing better than Skyfall did. And I think the scenes that were strangely slow in Skyfall, the slow scenes in this actually are integrated a lot better. Thomas Newman returns doing the score. He is a little busy at times. He doesn't really like to keep quiet, so even for like, mellower scenes, he's always got a perpetually kinetic score going on, and then he'll have sometimes some kind of languid drony pieces over it, but there's always this perpetual emotion, and sometimes that's a little too much. Thankfully, there are times when they know how to keep quiet. That's a key part of Bond films, is to know when to have the big brassy score overt in your face and know when to just steep the audience in the reality of what's going on in the scene and feel the danger. And they still pull it off great in this film. But yeah, some of his dirgier pieces are great. There's a lot of musical callbacks to Skyfall, which I thought was really cool, including his one piece that's like the Skyfall theme, essentially, that I still think he stole from the film Baraka, but whatever. So yeah, that's great. It would have been cool to have Roger Deakins back, but Hoyt van Hoytema's cinematography is maybe a little bit murky, but purposefully murky, and it has a very kind of earthy tone to it. But yeah, gorgeous stuff. I'm looking forward to going and check it out on IMAX. I just saw it in regular big ass, digital, and looking forward to going to check it out on IMAX with maybe a little bit beefier sound, etc. But yeah, I need to kind of let it soak a few more times before I place it in order in the whole pantheon. But yeah, I think it and Casino Royale so far are my two favorite Craig Bond films. But yeah, again, need to see it a few more times. I'm very psyched that there's a new James Bond film in the theaters right now, and that I can go see it again this weekend. So hopefully you guys enjoy it, and if you're Skyfall fans, I'm guessing you're gonna dig it. There might be one of those weird cases where there's a backlash or whatever because of Bond, or Daniel Craig's comments to the press lately about being done with Bond and all that. But just leave it out at the curb. Go in, check it out. And yeah, I'm still not sure if I'm into Sam Smith's tune. I picked up the CD, and they actually showed the video before the film too, which was kind of strange because I was trying not to watch the video because it had showed so many scenes from the film, and I'm like, I'm ready for the film. Like, don't show me these scenes that I'm about to see again, and then I'm about to hear the song that I'm about to hear again. The title sequence Daniel Kleinman did was very, very nice and elegant with the Spectre octopus intertwined and a lot of references to key characters from the previous Craig films. But yeah, so the jury's still out on the Sam Smith tune, but overall, it was definitely a satisfying release. Looking forward to seeing what they do next from here, where they're going to go. There's definitely nice groundwork laid for it. Interesting stuff with Bond and his relationships. A very Fleming-esque reality to Bond's relationships with the ladies, and one lady in particular in this film. So some good thematic juju there. And yeah, Spectre. Hope you guys check it out. And if you're Bond fans, hope you dig it. And meet back here. We'll talk some more Bond stuff. And I've got plenty more videos coming shortly. So cheers, everybody. Hope you have a great weekend.